Now we're going back to square one, making fire.
I think farm murders is an issue. So on the one hand, you score points, throw those guys under the bus. If I'm 100% honest with you, people do not own land. So we're always just talking about the land, land, land.
Johan, welcome to Beyond the Headlines. Good to have you on the show. How are you?
I am wonderful. Yeah, thank you for having me.
I see it is not as cold in Pretoria as it is here in PE.
No, yeah, in Pretoria, I'm in my pajamas. I'm not sure if that's allowed. I don't know what the dress code for the podcast, but I'm in my pajamas. And my pajamas actually, this is going to be quite a segue into this. This is not by design. I didn't plan this, but I've got a Steve Biko
What?
shirt like this, and then at the top it says, "This who dit is met Steve." Now, this who dit is met Steve was a show on KykNet about Steve Hofmeyer.
Okay.
So a friend of mine took the name of Steve Hofmeyer's show, This Who Dit Is Met Steve, and he put Steve Biko's face underneath it. So just taking like a very political, dare I say, problematic Afrikaner figure like Steve Hofmeyer and combine it with Steve Biko. I think it's fascinating. Anyways,
that's actually super fascinating. And what's your relationship with Steve Biko in particular, not Steve Hofmeyer?
So my mom's a history teacher, so I'm not sure in which year we dealt with apartheid history in school, but I remember reading I Write What I Like. I think it is somewhere here, and learning about the black consciousness movement. And I actually had the privilege of meeting Dr. Rampela a couple of times. Spoke a little bit about Steve Biko. So he was obviously a very interesting character, and tragically died too young. But I'll lie if I say that I know. I didn't do a dissertation on the guy.
Well, do you feel like you relate to him in a way? I mean, you've read I Write What I Like. Do you feel like you relate to him in a way? I mean, you sleep wearing a t-shirt with his face, so that says something.
Yeah, I mean, it's an iconic face, isn't it? I mean, it was on the cover of Drum magazine, and my wife actually has a handbag with this face, that Drum cover with Steve Biko's face. I think what I like is not I write what I like. I think what I like is the fact that you've got these two Steves, and they are the polar opposites. And to compare those two, so this really opens up conversation, because the Afrikaners recognize this who dit is met Steve. They recognize the Steve Hofmeyer connotation, and they also recognize the photo. So to those two worlds just opens up so much conversation.
And tell me, Johan, your position when you talk about this black and white thing. You know, a lot of people are uncomfortable having those conversations when you bring in the subject of colonialism, which we are going to be touching on, by the way, in our discussion. You see that some people become uneasy. I can make an example. There's a lecturer, somebody that I know actually, who was teaching in the sociology department in one of the institutions of higher learning. And because that was an institution that is dominated by Afrikaners, they made noise about it, and the guy ended up resigning. What's your take on this black Afrikaner conversation?
I mean, it's very important to have these conversations. I would say I don't really fit into a particular category because I'm a pastor here in Pretoria. So we're a small multicultural church. We try to be multicultural. We're predominantly Afrikaans, but yeah, we really try to be a multicultural community. And I'm involved with an NGO called Bietereinders, and Bietereinders is again trying to get Afrikaners into relationship with Black people, connecting the suburbs with the townships, etc.
Yeah.
And they obviously it's very much the conversation is very much on I want to say on racial lines. But then in my study field, I'm doing a PhD. I'm not a doctor yet, so I feel very intimidated in this conversation, and probably still a long while before I can call myself a doctor. But I'm doing a PhD on race and to try and figure out what's a good way to think about reconciliation and justice.
Mm.
And in those conversations and in the reading, I find myself agreeing and disagreeing with a lot that is happening in the various camps. So on the one hand, I can't I am not comfortable in the camp of, let's say, your reactionary right-wing conservative politics and ideas. I think I struggle to connect with that. On the other hand, I also have huge reservations when it comes to critical race theory. I can see the benefit of some of those aspects when we talk about Frans Fanon and decolonization, etc. There are certain aspects that I can accept, certain aspects that I can redeem, but also certain aspects that I just reject, that I'm uncomfortable with. So it's a bit
Yeah.
of a lonely place where I find myself, because if you ask me where do I find myself in this debate, when I speak to my Black friends, then I'm in trouble, and when I speak to my white friends, I find myself in trouble, because as I'm trying to figure these things out, I'm somewhere in the middle.
Interesting. I'm gonna come back to this. I want to go back to the word you dropped there. Bietereinders. What does it mean?
Yeah, so Bietereinders, the play on the word Bietereinders. So the Bietereinders were a group in the Anglo-Boer War, although today they talk about the South African War, between the British and the Boere, the Afrikaners, although a lot of Black South Africans fought on both sides of that conflict.
Yeah.
And in that conflict that started 1899, it only ended in 1902, and it was this massive British Empire against these bunch of misfit Afrikaners just walking in the veld. But these Afrikaners just refused to give up, and they started guerrilla warfare. And then the guys who refused to submit under British rule, they were called the Bietereinders. So the war was actually done. All the farms were burned down. They had this scorched earth policy, the British, so they would just burn down the houses. They'll take the women and children, put them in concentration camps. And then there were some Boere, some Afrikaners still fighting, and they were called the Bietereinders. And later on in Afrikaner nationalism, that term Bietereinders became sort of this tough guy, Afrikaner, macho type of person. And then when we started the NGO, I think it was back in 2016, 2017, we sort of piggybacking on that Afrikaner ego of the Bietereinder, but just turning it slightly into what does it look like to fight for a better end till the bitter end. So that same toughness, but for a better end. And we've got a Zulu name. Now I know you're a Zulu boy, so we don't have an English name because remember we've got beef with the English. We don't like them. So I married an English girl. So I have reconciled since. But us Afrikaners, we don't like the English. So,
I was about to call you order.
so we don't have an English name, but we've got a Zulu name. And we decided that the Zulu equivalent of Bietereinders is Skoko Sangampela. Skoko Sangampela. So we thought that's the best translation of the Bietereinders is Skoko Sangampela. So we say that, you know, the white pup, Uh, when it gets heated in this black pot that is South Africa, we are the Bietereinders are that pup that burns to the bottom of the pot. But we stick in this country, we stick in this pot. So that's why we call ourselves Koko.
Interesting. Now I know what you have for breakfast. You eat iskoko.
Indeed, indeed. Sangampela.
Listen, so
Mm.
something fascinating happened. I was in Pretoria just last week, and I happened to see this massive board that was written not USA but USA. And then I saw your face on television. I've forgotten one of the news channels, but you're speaking to Aldrin Sampear, and I thought that was actually very thought provoking. When I drove past it, I had a lot of thoughts in my head, and I kept asking myself, what were they thinking when they said not USA but USA? Can you clarify for me why you guys came with that? I think it's a movement. Why you decided to start such a movement, and what does it mean, really?
Mm. So it's a campaign, and I would say there are people. It's so weird. I'm not sure. I'm having this conversation with my black friends and my white friends because uh, both of them, both these two groups, there are there are groups within those groups who just love Trump.
Yeah,
And if you love Trump, then we say this is a very Trump type campaign. In the same way that Trump is very pro-American, we are very pro-South African. And then when we speak to our friends who hate Trump, we say, if you hate Trump, then this is the campaign for you, because we're saying our problems are not to be solved in America, it's just to be solved here in South Africa. So whether you like Trump or whether you don't like Trump, the campaign is supposed to speak to you.
mm.
I think I think we were just deeply annoyed at the fact that the white victimhood narrative has been proclaimed and played out and acted out in such a way that we received refugee status. And the fact that it was Afrikaners, not just white people, but Afrikaners specifically, that were invited to apply for refugee status in America. When that happens, people are speaking on my behalf as an Afrikaner, and I think as a small, admittedly small movement, Bietereinders, we just couldn't have that. We couldn't go along with that. So we said that we really do not see ourselves as victims. We realize that there are issues, especially farm mothers, that affects the Afrikaner or the white community in South Africa, and it's a very emotional thing. But South Africa has a crime problem.
Yeah,
And in South Africa, we all suffer under crime in various places. So for us to take an aspect, a particular crime that is affecting the white community, perhaps more than the black community, and to elevate that as the only or the biggest problem in South Africa. So to take our victimhood and just put it on this pedestal and cry to the world to such an extent that we receive refugee status is just not good for social cohesion. Because I mean, part of this campaign that we've been saying for a long time is that statistically, if you're a black person in South Africa, then you are more likely to be the victim of crime than a white person. Now,
yeah,
some of the critics, since we've said that, said, oh, that's because there are more black people in South Africa. I mean, I didn't do well at math, but I know how percentages work. So percentage wise, if you're a black person, then you are less likely to be a victim of crime. So we are just rejecting this idea that white people are these exceptional victims in South Africa. Farmer, this is a thing, but so is gang violence on the Cape Flats, in the townships, rural safety, various places. There are there's such a thing as gender-based violence. To elevate this one particular thing that affects us, to elevate white victimhood to this pedestal, I think is something that has been weaponized and something that we reject. So that's the one thing that we are saying. And I think also that a lot of black South Africans has been questioning our loyalty and our patriotism over the last few weeks, and perhaps for good reason. And I think some of us just wanted to say loud and clear that we are committed to this country, to South Africa, not to a homeland in the country, not to a separate Afrikaner colony, to South Africa.
Hmm. Johan, you mentioned something. You say that there's a lot of factors, of social factors in particular, that work against Afrikaners or whites in general in South Africa. Can you point some of those for me, please?
So you want me to sort of articulate
Yeah,
the white victimhood?
yeah,
What is it that people are complaining about? Okay, so let me be clear that I think farm murders is an issue. So on the one hand, you have people saying that there's a white genocide. On the other hand, you have people saying there's no such thing as farm murders in this country. And neither of those two are true. There is such a thing as farm murders in this country. It is nothing near a white genocide. There is a problem with rural safety. I'm not 100% sure about the numbers, but I think there's been about 4,000 farmers that's been killed since 1994. There is also statistics that suggests that farmers are significantly more likely to be killed than police officers in South Africa. That's a problem. That's a very real problem. But the way in which it has been painted is that you've got songs like Kill the Boer, you've got this issue of farm murders, and these things conflate to such an extent that people suggest that this is almost a political campaign. This is orchestrated. This is not necessarily coincidental. This relentless attack on white farmers. That's the most emotional one where people get.
I'm going to try and phrase my questions very carefully now, because we're talking about a sensitive issue. People are dying. But what do you make of the findings that most of the murders that take place in farms occur among families themselves and not necessarily from either your blacks against whites, vice versa? Usually, even if it is black people that are killing your white farmers in this case, it would be somebody from the family that has given that instruction because they want insurance. Julius Malema has said this. When he said it, I literally went online and I looked up some of the publications and I found what he said to be true, and it has been proven.
So I can't comment to that specific claim. What I can tell you is that farmers are isolated in a rural space, and they farm as a business. So on a farm, there's money. On a farm, there are guns. And on a farm, you are isolated. Your security is just by default compromised. So for people to attack farmers, as I think, has more to do with opportunism than it has to do with politics. Okay, so that's the one thing that I would say. The other thing is that there was recently a big protest, and again, sort of the political organizations mobilized against farm murders in my hometown of Newcastle a couple of years ago, and then when the protest died down and the investigation concluded, it turned out it was sort of a underground diamonds deal that went haywire. And then everybody keeps very quiet because that doesn't fit the narrative of these innocent whites just being killed by these brutal blacks. So the thing is, it's complicated. And you know what? I do not exclude the possibility that some of those 4,000 odd farm murders, that one or two of them was driven by racism. That is possible. But to say that that explains everything that's been going on in terms of farm murders, we live in a complicated country, and that's just not a complicated description of what's going on. You're right. You've got family feuds. You've got the fact that it's a business that's completely isolated. Sometimes it's revenge killings, etc. but to dilute it and reduce it rather to this is political and it's black on white and it is to take revenge. I just don't think that describes the whole picture.
Can you repeat that last part for me, please?
The idea that it's black on white and it's blacks who are taking back the land by force and they are politically motivated in their revenge, I don't think that picture stands up to scrutiny.
Okay. Because another thing, another thing that often worries me is that if Johan is killed, if Johan is murdered somewhere in the outskirts of the big cities, in farms on the countryside, the community is going to be very quick to march on the streets and start claiming that there is this brutality and it's blacks against whites. But when it is whites that are doing that to black people, you don't hear a lot of noise being made. Case in point, a few years ago, now these are the two instances where we saw something seriously happening in the country and people were angry. Do you remember the coffin case when farmers decided to, I think they buried a person alive or they put them in coffins?
Yeah, I think it was in Mpumalanga.
That's the first one. The second one is the sunflower boy. A young boy, I think he was not even at the time, who was murdered just because he picked one sunflower, you know? But when such things happen, and they do happen, just that you don't get to hear noises about them, do we still claim that there's much hatred for Afrikaners and we don't say it the other way around? Because oftentimes the noise comes if it is a white man or a white woman that is murdered. And that always gets to me.
I mean, let me maybe just push back a little bit here. So, I mean, it's not like I've done like a perfect study of all these events, but what I have seen is that the tribalism that is among black people is just as strong as it is among white people, in the sense that I remember there was that incident at Bietereinders not long ago. I can't remember the details, but the black community was very much rallied. The EFF pitched up, and it sort of you saw the predictable us against them. Black white people, white farmers are just brutally exploiting their workers, and the guys protested. The same. I can't remember exactly what transpired in Kulini, but I also suspect the EFF came, and again the narrative was these white farmers are exploiting black people, and they marched. So I think both sides use farms to mobilize their groups. I don't think it's just the white people who are doing that. And let's just take it away from farms and farm murders for a moment. But I mean, in South Africa, there was that incident with Swizer Reineke in the Northwest many years ago, where this lady just took a picture of the class, and then the black kids were separate from the white kids. But then there were like 5 pictures of the same day where everybody was integrated at various moments. But that one picture went viral, and this lady was immediately dismissed and expelled, and the MEC of Education in Northwest revealed her address, and it was just nuts. And black people were again mobilized against white people there. I think it's a very human thing for us, and because our history is what it is, it's not difficult for people to mobilize their groupings along racial lines. And I have to check myself every time my Afrikaans heartstrings are being pulled, and there's something in me that wants to just join my tribe and think that I am being attacked here. I have to check myself to make sure, is this really what's going on here, or is it just my Afrikaner tribalism kicking in.
Mm. I didn't know that that lady was axed from the school. I remember that trending image very well on Facebook. I saw it on Facebook, and this was about 4 or 5 years ago. It's not too long ago. It's just before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned at some point, and I've been watching quite a lot of your interviews, and I find them to be very interesting.
I'm sorry about that.
Huh? You're
But
saying you're sorry about that?
Well, that you are watching, you must download Netflix or something so you can watch
Oh,
something
no, I
better.
can't consume that. I can't consume Netflix content. I'm sorry. Anyway, you say that Afrikaners must come to the new SA. And again, this is something that got me asking myself what you meant by the new SA. Were you referring to the democratic SA? What do you mean they must come to the new SA? They are already here. What were your thoughts when you uttered that statement?
So the reality is, for many Afrikaners, especially in a place like Pretoria, it's very easy to just interact with Afrikaners. And a lot of my friends, my family members, are not racists in the obvious sense of the word. They are good people. I know there are many people on the left wing who doesn't want to believe that. They want to believe that all Afrikaners are racist. But
Mm.
I've got friends and family. They are good Afrikaners, but they are isolated. They go to Afrikaans schools, Afrikaans churches, it's Afrikaans social circles, and then maybe if they are lucky, sort of in a corporate environment, they get to interact with a Zulu or a Xhosa or a Tabang or a Sipo or whatever. But most of the time, we remain isolated. We don't live in Urania, we don't live in apartheid, but we live in a pocket here in Pretoria or in Cape Town or wherever, where there is just not interaction. And the problem with that is, if I am just spending time with white people, it becomes very easy to talk about the blacks. It becomes very easy to talk about the swart gevaar, the black danger. And if the only black people that I'm interacting with are Julius Malema on television, and that's the only black person I see, then it's very easy to get me emotional, to get me riled up about, just these guys are out together, etc. So what we are saying is that if we can facilitate, and that's something that Bietereinders tries to do, if we can facilitate conversations and relationships so that a Yuan gets to meet a Dr. Q, Kinisani, come on, my tongue is still very much colonized. I'm sorry about that.
That's just good.
But for let's say your name is actually Tabang or Sipo or Sapiwe or whatever. It becomes more difficult to talk about the blacks, and the blacks are coming. If you've got a friend named Sapiwe, if you've got a friend named Tabang, it becomes much more difficult for the, let's say, the black radical to talk about, wow, we need to chase these whites into the sea, and the problem with South Africa is whiteness, and it's just white monopoly capital, white, 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 white. But if there's a Yuan or a Skulk or a Kunrad or a Niku, then it becomes more difficult for these polarizing populist politicians to rally up their base. So for me, I've experienced as an Afrikaner, we've got this sense of fear that if we integrate and if we have those relationships, then we might lose something. We might lose our Afrikanerness. My experience has been that I've only gotten more Afrikaans, not less Afrikaans. Because when I talk to you as a Zulu, I realize, oh my goodness, I've got these Afrikaner mannerisms, the bad fashion sense, as we've already seen, and the accent and my music and my mannerisms. I don't lose Afrikaans when I interact with my black friends. I become more Afrikaans because it's actually accentuated. So there's a lot of fear in the Afrikaner or in the white community. That's not just, obviously, I know many people would just say, no, they're just bad racists. It's not the case, not always the case. So to take them and to facilitate them. So for example, what we do is we just go play soccer in the township, and we bride it. We don't fix anything. We don't paint anything. We just have those relationships. And then you see lots of stereotypes being broken down, when those types of things happen. I mean, there are a lot of other things that we do, but ultimately we want to be a door for Afrikaners or white people in general to really enter the new South Africa, because you're going to get more, not less.
Hmm. Hmm. You just mentioned something very interesting. I recently sat like this, and I was sitting right here talking to Joost Stradom. I think he is head of PR for Oranje, or CEO for the Oranje movement. He just wears too many hats. But unlike what you're saying now, his thinking is, because the Afrikaner community is a minority, there is a need for them to protect themselves, to protect their culture and everything they have at all cost. Hence, there is that concept of Oranje. And here you are, an Afrikaner man, and you are saying, actually, what we need is the opposite. We need to cross-pollinate. We need to coexist with the Black population. At what point did you feel a need, or did you realize that there has to be that cross-pollination? Because I'm assuming, being a guy from Pretoria, did you grow up in Pretoria or Newcastle? I heard you say Newcastle earlier.
No. I'm from Natal, so I'm honorary Zulu.
Honorary Zulu, okay, Shaka.
So I grew up in KZN, and then I went to study in Potchefstroom. Now, when you study in Potchefstroom, that's the most Afrikaans place in the world. Even the dogs, when they bark, they've got distinct Afrikaans accents over there. And then I came to Pretoria, which is not much better than Potch.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at what point did you then realize that we need to have this coexistence as the different groups, as Afrikaners and your Black population?
So I didn't listen to your podcast with US. I listened to a bit of it, and he seems like a nice guy. I've got friends who
It does.
are
It does.
involved in the Urania movement,
Mm-hmm.
and people will be very disappointed if they interact with those guys, because they are not typical racists. They are not these RVB types. They are careful thinkers. They are committed Christians. They've got good relationships with many Black people. So it's difficult. It would have been easy for me to just throw them under the bus and say, they are just those types of racists, when my experience with them specifically has not been that. I the way I see Urania is like it's a humble version of apartheid. So what I mean by that is it's still this idea of apartness. It's still this idea of separate development. It's still this idea that only if we are a secure community can we engage with other Black communities, and then there can be sort of an interaction like that. And there's a lot of humility in their approach, but I think we focus too much on them. They're really a small little town. So let me just maybe talk about my experience, my conviction. So I think that my Afrikaansness, and I've already alluded to it, is not threatened in when it comes into contact with a Zulu or a Xhosa or even a Brit, even an Englishman. I think I am secure enough in my Afrikaner identity to not feel threatened when those connections come. And you should actually understand a little bit about the Afrikaner, because the Zulu and the Afrikaner, they are not that different. So the Zulu is also, I'm asking more than I'm telling you, is also like very passionate about their language, about their customs, about their culture. And they're also offended if you can't speak Zulu. And I think there's also a sense of, if we stay together, it will be easier for us to maintain the sense of Zulu identity and Zulu pride. So the Afrikaner in that sense is not much different from the Zulu. I think, given the history of this country and given a sense of security that I have as an Afrikaner, I think a prophetic thing that we can do now is to live in a multicultural community, to do life together. For me, it is just more exciting. I just find the idea of the Springboks with a Sia Kolisi and the Lucanio and a Cheslin Colby and a Pieter Stef de Toy, I just find that a more exciting story to be part of than
Mm.
an all-white team or an all-black team.
Yeah.
No pun intended with the All Blacks team, but you know what I mean. Like that idea of rising above our differences and to buy into this idea of a rainbow nation, which I know is a swear word among blacks and whites these days, but to buy into something bigger than us. For me, that is just far more exciting. There is something boring about just hanging out with people who look and sound and smell the same as me. There is
Yeah.
something exciting about all these differences merging into one, but it's still under the banner of South Africa. And to try and make that work. And it's very difficult and it's tricky. And we've got different ideas about so many things, and we've got different histories, and there's different pain. But for me, it's not necessarily a moral issue. That's why I don't think Urania is immoral necessarily. And I know there's a debate about that. And I also know the existence of Urania hurts a lot of my black friends. And maybe there's a discussion about that. But I won't just dabble on the moral implications of it. For me, it's far more interesting to say the adventure, the excitement of a new South Africa. That's
Mm.
something that excites me. I want to be part of that. And that's why when Trump or anybody offers me refugee status in America, that's just utterly dull, man. South
Yeah.
Africa is absolutely the place to be because it's this huge experiment, and many people are betting against us that we're not going to make it work. And man, I for one, and Bietereinders in general, we want to prove them wrong.
Mm. Mm. And how do you think what the solid what do you call them? What
Solidariteit.
Africa has done could potentially do to you guys, the broader Afrikaner community against blacks right now? What
Yeah.
damage do you think they've caused?
So let me say this: I'm not one of those guys who's an AfriForum hater or a
Yeah.
Solidariteit hater, because it can be easy now for me to score some points among uh, my black fans. You know, the four of them. To say, yeah, no, you score points, throw those guys under the bus. If I'm 100% honest with you, my best friend from university is high up in solidarity. I've got good friends. My roommate, the guy who lived next to me in Res for 5 years, is high up there. So I can't just say that these guys are just bad guys. But I do think that they've been very irresponsible with a narrative of particularly farm murders combined with BE, etc. And maybe we can talk about BE. And they've painted this picture of white marginalization.
Hmm.
And we can debate whether it's fair or not. I think we've already discussed the farm murders aspect of it. But I don't think it's good for social cohesion. What I'm far more interested in is there's a guy called John Matutle. He's a pastor there in Senegal in the Free State. And when that whole mess started there, Brendan Horner and his death, this guy mobilized and a black community, and he just said, "This is tragic. It's tragic what happened." And here's a black guy sort of standing up for something that really hurts the white community. And he says, "You know what? We are in solidarity with you there." And there's something beautiful in that. And I think there will be something very beautiful in an Afrikaner organization saying, you guys, we are in solidarity with the black guys because there's something that is happening there. And let's say it's Marikana or something that really affected and is emotional to black people. And we say, we stand with you, we condemn that. It just
Mm.
takes the sting out of this whole thing when we attach ourselves to each other's trials, each other's sufferings. That's why we've got this line that we say, "On suffer saam." We are suffering together. In South Africa, we've got a crime issue, and we are suffering together under crime.
Yeah.
And I think the gains that we've made under guys like Rassi, Erasmus, and Siakalisi, and I know we can't just put all our eggs in the Springbok basket, but there was really a sense. I mean, was it last year, the year before, where we really just rallied behind this team, and it made us believe in something. And I think we've lost a lot of that
Mm.
with this. If you just look at social media, I'm sure among your black friends, you might even be in trouble to talk to guys like me and to the Urania guy. Um, so I think we have gone back a few years in terms of reconciliation.
Yeah.
Don't think I don't think it's I don't think it's the end. I think we can salvage it, but it's going to be hard work. And that's why
Mm.
Bietereinders, as a small little Afrikaner movement, we're sticking up our hands and we're saying uh, we don't associate with this idea of white victimhood. We also do not associate with the idea of a Afrikaner homeland. We are for South Africa and for all her people. Um, yeah.
Okay. You just reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend when he saw that I was actually in conversation with Yost. I was like, what do you want your listeners to get from this conversation? Why did you talk to this guy? And that was one episode of this podcast that he didn't watch. So you are right. I might still be in trouble with such people that don't believe that this platform should be open to everyone that actually has a voice and has to express themselves, you know. But I like the fact that we are a country that encourages freedom of speech. And for as long as this podcast exists, that will be the case. I want to go back again. You've mentioned the term social cohesion twice and social justice twice. And I saw in one of the interviews that you had, you kept talking about social justice. And as I understand, you are doing your PhD in theology.
Theology, yeah.
Okay. And you marry that with social justice in your everyday speech. But then I happen to be doing a short course right now where I'm taking psychology modules. And in this one particular module, we learn about Christianity, we learn about the arrival of white people, and we learn about how Christianity was systematically used as a tool to oppress people. And you're a pastor. I'm having this conversation with the right person. And I must confess, I'm also from a strong Christian family. I've got Bibles here, more than 5 actually. So I'm not going to criticize or anything. I just want to know what your take is on this issue of Christianity and colonialism.
Mm. So there's no doubt that the church has lost its way at various moments during its 2,000-year history.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no doubt that Christianity has been abused for political gains, has been racially abused. So I'm not going to defend that. But I also think we need to be a little bit more fair with how we treat Christianity, especially as it pertains to colonialism. And this is not a very popular idea at the moment, and I still need to research it some more. But the one thing that I think is often overlooked is the fact that there is not one struggle icon, or maybe there's one, but there are very few struggle icons, whether it's the Oa Tambos, whether it's the Nelson Mandelas, whether it's the Steve Bikos, who were not the products of missionary, specifically Methodist missionary schools. And then the other thing that is often not reported is the fact that the Dutch East Indian Company and also the English East Indian Company fought very hard to keep missionaries off their boats because they didn't want those missionaries to interfere with their business interests. So the line that we often hear is like, when we came here, we had the land, you guys had the Bible, now we have the Bible, you guys have the land. And I'm sure there is an element of truth to that. But there's also lots of evidence of these missionaries fighting the colonial forces on behalf of the people that they were ministering to. So this idea that they were sort of 100% in cahoots with the colonial empire and sort of spies, etc., I just think is a little bit unfair. Also, there's no doubt that the abolition of slavery was 100% driven by the evangelicals in the forms of William Wilberforce and the Clapham sect over there in England, when slavery was abolished in America after this brutal civil war. Again, it was Christians like Frederick Douglass and others who stood up against this system. And the civil rights movement in the United States was almost exclusively driven by the church, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, etc. And a massive portion of the anti-apartheid struggle was driven by the church against Beyers Naudé, Desmond Tutu, Frank Chikane, etc. That doesn't mean that the church has messed up, but it's also wrong to say that the church has only been abused and it's been this white man's gospel that was completely in, like I said, cahoots with colonialism. I just don't think it stands up to historical scrutiny. Also, the other problem that you have is that at the center of Christianity, there are two very pivotal stories. The one is you've got a people who are oppressed and they are being liberated. The Israelites are oppressed by the Egyptians and they are being liberated from this oppression. Now, if you are trying to subjugate people, that's not a very good story to put in their hands. And then at the center of the gospel is you've got a man that is killed by religious authorities and this empire of Rome. And there is this story, or this new idea, this kingdom of God, where there's no Greek, no Jew, no male, no female, no slave, no free. And people just rally behind this new idea, and eventually it spreads over this whole empire, and eventually this whole empire collapses because of this idea of equality. That's at the center of the biblical story. So again, if you're going to subjugate people and you put that book in their hand and they open that book and they read it, it is a story of quiet and beautiful revolution. It's a critique of empire. That's why I think the Bible itself, if you just go through the Gospels and you see the various stories where the religious authorities and the empire are the bad guys, and the small and the weak and the vulnerable are presented as the good guys, then it doesn't make sense to suggest that this book is sort of this blueprint to ensure oppression.
You know what? So my grandfather is a lay minister in an Anglican church, and I've always been a church boy from a very young age to this day. What I can safely tell you is that Christianity, church, religion, whatever you want to call it, even non-Christian churches, I think one good thing that we get from these institutions is that they teach you very good fundamental values about life. But with Christianity, what I keep asking myself again is, are you looking for the Bible now?
No. so sorry. I'm listening to you. I'm looking for a book on Albert Lutuli, but let me
Okay.
focus there.
What I keep asking myself is, how do we as church people, especially you as a white man, stand on a podium in front of the people and convince them to join this religion that oppressed them so much to a point that they ended up losing their land? How do you do that, Johan? Do you ever think about that for starters? Because in all honesty, people lost land from way back in the day, even before you were born, by the way. I know these are problems that you've also inherited, but what does this mean for you as somebody who ministers? And is there a feeling of, oh, I wonder if I'm the right person to say this to the people, you know? Because some people are permanently scarred, and that's why we have people that actually hate Christianity.
So when you talk about the land, when you talk about, I mean, you used so many terms. You use social justice. You use land. You use Christianity. How do all of these things, a difficult history, how do all of these things come together? So here's my attempt at dealing with that. One of the problems that we have is that there's this massive historical injustice in the form of colonialism, in the form of apartheid that happened in South Africa. My experience always is that white people are very individualistic. Black people are far more communal. So when I walk with my white friends and I bump my toe, then they laugh at me. When I walk with my black friends and I bump my toe, they say, "Ish, I'm sorry. Are you okay? You okay?" Then I say, "Well, no, it's not your fault." And then they just say, "But are you okay? Are you okay?" So there's this communal, your pain is my pain versus this individual. Well, if you can't walk, it's not my problem. If you bump your toes, like you learn how to walk. And I think the same is true for sort of how we relate to history. The the shame for the white person often, and I don't even think white people are doing this on purpose. I really don't think they necessarily feel the shame for what happened before if they were not if they were not directly associated with it. And it's got to do with a worldview, a more individualist worldview versus a more communal worldview. That doesn't mean that that we're off the hook. I'm just trying to tell you how we sort of relate to this issue of land, etc. Another problem is that the vast majority of white people do not own land. As an agricultural expert yourself, you'll know that I think there's something like 40,000 commercial farming units in South Africa.
Less than that,
Less than that. Yeah. So, so the vast majority of white people do not own land. So if you say we must give back the land, we stole the land, it's not a very nuanced way of explaining the complexity of colonialism, apartheid, etc., etc. So, so now there's this expropriation act. We're always just talking about the land, the land, the land. I do not have land. I've got this townhouse here in Pretoria, and if you expropriate this, you're going to be very disappointed about your real estate decisions that you made. But I've got something to give, but it does not exist in my land. It exists in my resources. It exists in my social capital. It exists in my connections. So now this is why I think reconciliation and justice belongs next to each other. Many people, many of your friends will say, first justice, then we can talk about reconciliation. First give back the land, then we can talk about reconciliation. And again, here I am. I don't have land to give necessarily. But here's what I see. If we reconcile and you're in my life and we share life together, my networks emerge. In other words, somebody whispers, "Do you know somebody who can help me? I'm looking for an agricultural expert on this and this and this." Ah, okay. I know this Dr. Q. I'm going to connect you with this guy. Now somebody says, I'm looking for someone to do this. Ah, okay. Well, because I'm connected to part two, I'm going to connect part two to that. Somebody says, I've got extra money that I want to give. Do you know of somebody who wants to study further, who needs a bit of an opportunity? Yes, I do know someone, and I can connect them to these things. And there you can see reconciliation and justice existing with each other. They are not the opposite of each other, they belong together. And this doesn't mean that there shouldn't be structural changes. I'm not a politician, but most of the time, this conversation is just at a macro level. It's just at a systemic level. People are just talking, no, we need systemic changes. We need to unlock this and that and that. But for me, the way in which I'm convicted to do this thing and to fight for justice is through reconciliation and to open up these opportunities to to seek justice, but in a relational way, if that makes sense. And I've seen it the other way around. I've seen, I don't want to say poor, but let's say a white kid who wanted to go to university, didn't have enough cash to do that, and a black businesswoman going to her black mining company, getting a bursary for a Afrikaans girl. And to me, that's so beautiful when those kinds of things happen. That's why reconciliation is so important. And maybe that's one of my biggest criticisms against Urania, is that if we do not share space, if there's no proximity, then this, I want to call it natural justice, cannot emerge. So I'm not sure if I'm making sense. And I realize that this can sound very sentimental to many black academics like yourself, and you're going to just cancel me now. But
No, I'm actually not.
this is something that I'm committed to.
Yeah, I'm actually not. Where you just ended, in 2017, when the university wanted to evict me because I was owing thousands and thousands of rands, I remember crying with my grandmother over the phone because Mark Deschalain, may his soul rest in peace, was checking up on me on a random day. And I just told him I can't even get up from the floor because I was literally sleeping on the floor, squatting and or cohabiting. That's the term that is often used. And he then asked for my statement and paid off that entire amount. Okay. So it's a white man that came through for me. And in the subsequent years, it would be white men that actually come and assist me in many ways. I could actually write an entire thesis about that. Even when I was younger, by the way, I told you about my mentor when I was growing up, just before we started the show. Anyway, that's not where we are. I think we can conclude this conversation now, but as a parting shot, I would like you to maybe, for the benefit of our viewers and our listeners, to just go back to the USA campaign and tell us what your vision is, how people can get involved, and how we can help you realize your vision with USA. Oh, no, let me not say it like that, with USA.
So my vision for USA is that South Africans should stay in this SA, not in USA. But so we do different things. The one thing that we do is we've done this in Pretoria and Joburg. We're doing it in the Western Cape soon. We've got this little conference that we call How to Stay. And we get lots of South Africans from different sectors of society, and they share how they are staying in South Africa. And there are just beautiful stories from the agricultural sector, beautiful stories from township development, etc. And it's almost in this short little TED style type talk where people share how they are living intentionally in South Africa. With the USA You South Africa campaign, we've got about 10 billboards that are up in Gauteng at the moment, which is a very generous gift from different people who are getting on board with that. You can buy the T-shirt if you go on Bietereinders website and you just if you just email to admin, I mean, I know we're not very good with that, but if you just admin@bietereinders.co.za, then you can order not USA, but USA t-shirt. I think in general, what we are asking black and white people to do is to just get away from this online animosity and just connect. And I know it sounds sentimental, but to just put a braai somewhere and connect around that braai. Because as I've articulated, or at least try to articulate, it is when we reconcile with one another that I want to say justice starts to take care of itself to a certain extent. When we pull each other into our networks. And the way in which we do that is not necessarily, and I don't want to open this debate about expropriation without compensation, but I like this line that says, the way to get to my resources is not through expropriation without compensation, it's through friendship. And that's why I'm very much committed to this idea. And I know a lot of people are angry with this idea and they will just say, oh, it's just Tutu Mandela, rainbow nationisms and sentimental nonsense. But as Bietereinders, we are still very much committed to that vision. So to black people, we want to say we are committed to this country and you're not going to get rid of us that easily. And to black people, well, that's what we're saying to black people. To white people, we are saying, yeah, we must really stop playing this victim card. And if we play our victim card, if we really want to activate it, then at the very least, we need to put it in tension with many of the experiences that our black brothers and sisters are going through in this country. And by and large, we are not saying anything. I mean, we've gotten a lot of criticism. You guys are, you love BEE, you're 100% for BEE, you guys are for farmers. We're not saying any of those things, but we're just saying that if we look at our lives as white people, and if we look statistically and we do a bit of a life audit, there's no reason to say that we are these terrible victims as opposed to black people or colored people, even Indian people in this country. So yeah, we want people to stay in South Africa, and hopefully this campaign can just be a bit of positive vibes and create a little bit of social cohesion.
Wow. Johan, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure conversing with you. I think this has been a very, very fruitful conversation, and I'm hoping that our listeners are going to appreciate this piece of thinking, I'll say, because there's a lot of thought that went into this conversation. And yeah, I think we will be engaging online. They will also be engaging with you. Some of them are even going to want to shout out and buy that t-shirt. Perhaps if we could just, if you allow, we could put that link underneath this, because I think this is for a great cause. But I would seriously love to see more black people there. If I may say this, I would love to see more black people, because I saw some of the images under that USA billboard that has been shared, and I still see many whites gathering around the braai stand. If it is the braai stand, I think that was the braai stand. So let's see more blacks. Let's see more whites. Let's have that cross-pollination and not whites and a few blacks.
Well, Baba, you are invited. You don't. As an Afrikaner, we pride ourselves in our braaiing ability. So
and your pop.
No. You guys are the pop guys. You can do the pop. I'll do the meat.
One of my former students would disagree with you there. His surname was Pereira. I've forgotten his first name, and he would tell me, "Sir, I ate pap and I'm tired," and this would be 8:30 a.m. all the damn time. Johan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Now we're going back to square one, making fire.